It's my pleasure to hand the floor back over to our instructor for the day, Grace. Take it away, Grace.
Hi, everyone. It was great talking to some of you about your projects. And now we're going to debrief as a group and see what went well, what didn't go well, how far did we get, what can we do? So I have some discussion questions I've dropped in the chat, and we'll just take them one by one. I do have the group names, but I'm hoping a group would volunteer to go first. So if anyone would like to start talking about what happened and whether you were able to deploy your survey, please jump on in.
Like, do we just have to say whether we were able to deploy it or not?
Yeah, and then talk about what the process was like, how your experience was overall, if you were able to deploy it.
Okay. Well, hi, I'm from James Baldwin group, and it was me and James and Matteo. And we decided we were interested in running a brief survey to see the experiences of, just to understand the experiences of social media users with content on disability in social media platforms. So we were interested in seeing what the relationship would be, and our questions were based on that, kind of like trying to see, first of all, the demographic information, and then their social media usage, and then after that, how whether they come across content on disability and how they react to that content, and eventually at the end, kind of just to see if they learn anything from that content and whether they perceive what they're learning to be negative or positive. And then at the very end, we added a question on an open-ended question for them to just let us know anything that they would want to share. And we were able to actually deploy, I mean, it's supposed to be getting deployed right now. Like, we gave all of our information. I think he's doing it right now.
So did you face any challenges with coming up with the questions?
Yeah, we definitely did, because we edited and re-edited the questions so many times, and it took all the three of us to like take a break and come back, because when initially you write a question, you think it makes sense, and then when you come back later, it's like, oh, we're not going to get the answer that we're trying to get with this question. And so we had to we reviewed so many of the questions so many times and had very many different versions of the same question so many times. I think, what else? But then it was interesting, kind of like trying to figure out how to design a survey that people would be able to find interesting, and they won't be bored and they won't grow tired of responding to. And wait, do you randomize the order of your questions? No, we did not randomize the order of our questions, because it was very important for us to have a specific order to get what it is that we thought we would get, and also because it's kind of a sensitive subject, so we didn't want to randomize the questions. And yeah, this activity made me realize that I do want to work with people outside of political science, in terms of how there's some things that I take for granted, and some terminologies that I was taking for granted, and ways of expressing myself that like James and Matteo were able to point out and be like, hey, if we did this, it would be more clear. If we did that, it would be more clear. And that was good. And I think that is all.
Yeah. You have a question from Jesse in the chat box. He wants to know what the completion code you were using. So you may want to write to him. Jesse, we also have a request for you to stick around afterwards, so groups who have not deployed are able to. So groups, please reach out to, James, drop the chat box. There is a confirmation code. But Jesse, we have a request for people to deploy afterwards. Let us know if that's something you can do, and we'll set up a space for you for that.
What time is afterwards? Just, I don't have the schedule in front of me, so.
So great question. So this group is done by 3:45 Eastern time. we can open up a room for you to continue meeting with folks if needed.
I have to leave from 3:30, but I can come back at 4. So
Great.
if
Okay,
anyone
so
is-
folks still want to deploy, Jesse will hang out at 4. Thank you, Jesse.
Thanks.
Okay, can we hear from another group? Want to know what your survey was about, what challenges you faced, whether you deployed or didn't, and so on.
I can go, Grace. We were also able to deploy our survey with Jesse's help. It was pretty simple, but I haven't used cloud research before. So I was thinking it might be kind of an interesting platform to look into in the future. Also, I should say I worked with Joyanna and we were in group Marsha P. Johnson. Our survey was pretty short, honestly, because we wanted to make sure it wasn't like fatiguing for people, especially since there were already kind of a lot of policy questions in there. Joanna found some really interesting Pew questions about social media and racist comments, which I thought was cool because it kind of aligned with the questions we had already put in about social media. So we asked people, like in the past 3 months, how many of your friends or family have expressed opposition to racism or racial inequality on social media? And then in thinking about people who have expressed opposition, do you think that was motivated basically by like genuine concern about the treatment of Black people in our country or social pressure to express opposition? So I thought it would definitely be cool to like run a bigger survey in the future to examine whether, you know, people who use a particular social media platform report seeing more opposition to racism and whether that seems more performative or genuine depending on the platform as well. I would say the main challenge for us was just kind of learning a new platform for data collection and surveying. There's like a little bit of a learning curve, I think, and I had a little trouble trying to figure out how to do some things. So we did end up randomizing the order of the items in the questions, but it didn't randomize the questions themselves. I would say, like Mango, I really appreciated working with someone from another discipline just to kind of hear Joyanna's perspectives on, you know, when we might use certain survey methods, or especially in the data analysis section, when we might use different techniques. And I also really appreciated something else that Mango said, which was Jesse's suggestion to add an open-ended question at the end of the survey, just asking if anybody had anything to say. Because while we deployed, I basically was able to look at that really quickly just to see if there were any issues with the survey, and luckily there weren't, but I felt like that was really helpful.
That's great. It sounds like a really interesting survey. I do want to note something that I threw in the chat. If you liked working with MTurk, their partner, Cloud Research, has a grant available that's due at the end of July. So if you really like this project and you want to get money for it, try to apply. It's due in a couple of weeks. So I encourage you to do that. Okay, let's hear from another group.
I can go.
Great, thank you for volunteering.
No problem. Our group is Audrey Lord, and then we have Beth. What else?
Rohita.
Oh, Rohita. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to look at the notes. In our group. So we start with our conversation by just trying to know the common interests of our group, and then didn't realize we only have an hour time slot to create a survey. So we kind of take a shortcut just using my previous survey that was focusing on college students, their goal persistence and their subjective college experiences. My study previously was focusing on African American with disabilities, but we kind of opened up the population to just focusing on college students. And then in the survey, we actually turned out having too many items or measures. So we kind of just keep it 6.5 minutes to do that. And then we were actually able to launch the data, deploy the data to the MTurk. Right now, I think we have 16 participants, 16 participants. Oh, now 17. while we're talking become 7 teams. So I used Enter before, and then it was relatively quick collecting the data. I remember I have 500 participants within 30 minutes. But for this one, I think because we limited to college students, so that's why it took a little longer than what we expect. So yeah, that's a little things we encounter. Issues we notice is that the measurements that I incorporated in the survey is that those is from like a well-validated psychometric measurements. So there are items that we have like a scales from 1 to 5. There are scales 1 to 7. So that might be something we should be mindful when we put it into the Google form. It may be a good idea to put it into a different page so that it won't be confusing to the respondent. And we didn't randomize our items because those measurements are well validated, as we kind of just keep them as chunk, like divide them based on the instruments. Okay. Anything else I missed?
I'm sorry, was someone else talking?
Yeah, I was wondering, is there anything else I should be mentioning?
No, but other group members are welcome to jump in as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Beth, do you have
All of you.
anything you want to add it to it?
No, I think you covered it well.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for.
Okay, let's hear from another group. I do want to say I appreciate that everyone has really enjoyed working with people from different disciplines. Do it again. You have a research project next week, and I encourage you to try to work with different disciplines. It leads to better collaboration, more creative ideas, and a lot of other things. So next group, we've heard from Audrey Ward, and sorry, go ahead.
Hi, so this is Kevin S. So my group was myself, Nina, and Diana. So our project idea, we spoke about it a lot. So we haven't been able to deploy yet, but we hope to deploy after this debrief. We basically came up with an idea where we want to look at the impact of the pandemic, specifically in terms of social isolation and learning loss. And so the thing that I learned, and I think I've heard it from a lot of other groups, is that with Nina's background in like social work, she thought very, very deeply about instruments and how you ask questions, and how just because you ask a question, like for example, or you use a word like even inequality, right? What does inequality actually mean, right? So you may ask a question about inequality, but to the person reading it, they may have a completely different conceptualization of inequality than you do. Same thing with like social isolation, right? Same thing with like anti-Blackness, right? These terms, people may view them very differently depending on their background and like upbringing and like education. And so that was something that I definitely during the course of like creating these questions had to like think about more deeply than I have in the past. In terms of issues of, but we were able to come together and like make a bunch of questions, and it was really I thought the product or our end product was really good. The thing is, in terms of randomizing the questions, we decided against that because we want to kind of, because part of our the survey is also to figure out people with children too. So we wanted to get people's information on like their household size, like how many children that they have or they don't have, right? And so we wanted to follow kind of like a logical step pattern from one section to the other. And in terms of my own research, so most of my own research, and I think it's, Anita and I were talking about this, it's like pretty different, where like with her work and social work, it's like you have to be very careful because of the kind of groups that you're dealing with social work. But when it comes to econ, it's more a lot of secondary data sources, right? And so this exercise, because I've never used Google Forms before to actually make a form, to make a survey. So it was actually a very interesting exercise. And so I definitely think I'll be utilizing it again to get maybe some more primary data, especially with like MTurk and some of these other tools that you can use to deploy and get you can deploy to get respondents and then get data.
Yeah, it was really interesting that you said that you hadn't realized that people have different conceptualizations of these terms. Did you end up defining them in your survey, or did you just decide on your own definition and hope that the participants knew what you meant?
So what ended up happening is, for a term where we're talking about inequalities, Nina actually wrote out what it meant. So like where we were talking about, do you think that the pandemic like increased or decreased like inequalities in like children's education? And then if you said it like increased inequalities, this is what we basically like Nina wrote out like a definition of what that actually means. Yeah, it kept it somewhat stable, and she wrote something else for that. So we made sure for those terms, which again are very like the conceptualization of it is so important to like answering the survey question, we wrote out what it meant.
That's amazing. Great job trying to control for some of that variance. I believe we might have one or two more groups. Can we hear from you? Yeah, go for it.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
Thanks. Just wanted to plug one thing that I learned, not being from the US, or something that was interesting, which is just taking care of what options, even in the demographics, what options are we putting for the questions, because different regions within the side of the world that I do research, the options will show up different when you're asking somebody about their gender or about their ethnicity or about annual income and how you explain how you're measuring that and so on. So, or what region they're from and what that means, even occupation as well. So something that we had to take great care to try to do was to make sure even the demographics fit the specific context that, you know, we're expecting our respondents to come from.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your input. I remember going into your group and even regions, we were talking about, well, what if people don't know what we mean by the Northeast, because someone might live in a state and might think one thing is the Northeast, whereas other people might not connect to it. I believe that was your group. So yeah, that's very much true. We have to think about demographics as well. Rebecca, it looks like you have something to say too.
Word, thanks. I'm at a cafe, so if my Wi-Fi goes out, I'll just like pass it to one of my group members to talk a little bit more. So basically, so I just wanted to follow up, just because we also had sort of like a pandemic motivation for the questions that we were asking. So first off, we were primarily concerned, this is coming from more like Rashid's questions, the question of like how individuals and communities have managed to recover from the pandemic. So and so that was kind of one side of the survey. The other side was kind of dealing with, I have recently engaged with this guy, Roger Shattuck's book. He has a book called Forbidden Knowledge, and he talks a lot about how the increase of like social media and like this sort of increased social consciousness that like tons of people, you know, our generation is characterized by, may have these sort of negative effects on the ways that he doesn't explicitly talk about mental health, but I think that it's kind of like a natural maybe consequence of the sort of like levels of knowledge that we have about sort of social problems and the crises that are going on in the world. So in addition, so we kind of like melded those two, I guess, like questions to basically devise our survey around sort of like how housing precarity, like healthcare precarity, and like mental health have essentially related. So yeah, it was a pretty great process to work together and sort of figure out the best ways to write questions out. I had written a question on the extent to which people feel a social responsibility to ameliorate some of the world's problems, and Rashid graciously told me that that question probably wouldn't make any sense to anyone. So it was cool to be able to work together and figure out what is the best way to frame things. And so obviously we were pulling a lot of questions from prominent, survey like groups such as like SurveyMonkey and some like sort of some of the national surveys that we use in political science and sociology as well. So yeah, that was kind of our experience. Our survey got fielded, and we have, I think, upwards of like 20 responses right now, which is good. And I'm super excited to analyze the data. And yeah, so let me know if there's any questions.
Okay, do we have one more group? I think we might have one more group.
I do have a question actually for Rebecca. Do you have any insight on how we can ameliorate some of the world's problems?
Yeah, I'm working on that. Like hopefully the dissertation project will not be written in vain.
Yeah, we have one more group. So we were in the Rashad Robertson group. This is Gia and Kevin Igwe. And the topic we landed on was looking at US Americans' view of and experience with activism on social media. And this came from a report on Black Lives Matter turns 10, which came out last month on the Pew website. And so we took a subset of their survey questions and then we added our own that kind of related to more of like a spin on our interests that we talked about before we decided on the topic. So some of the questions related to the positive. So for example, like, there's a lot of idea about how negative social media is. And so some of the questions were related to some of the positive impacts. So do you think that it gives voice to the underrepresented? Do you think it's easier to hold powerful people accountable? And also how they use social media. So do you use it to find others who share, your views? Do you encourage others or yourselves to like get involved in social and political issues? We were able to deploy, and as of now, we have 12 responses. So that's great. In terms of the challenges, one was thinking about the MTurk population and what kind of questions we can even answer from it. So a lot of the Pew data had like analyses by race. And as you can imagine, MTurk is not a racially diverse set of workers. And so we just couldn't answer some of the questions that the Pew was able to with their bigger data set. Also, some of us were interested in different age populations like teens, and they cannot work. So we could not answer those questions either. Some of the stuff related to the surveys that we thought about, order effects, right? So we were thinking about randomizing, but we couldn't figure that out on Google Forms. So we just kind of dropped it. But we thought that it might be important to not let our just kind of like how we wrote the questions out initially be the order that they end up coming out in, because there might be order effects. We did randomize the options within each question. So across people saw different orders there. And we did spend a lot of time, like Kevin Smith brought up, on a lot of like terminology. So we were interested in asking people whether they expressed more of their like, well, here we go again. So like anger or hate, or, is it their feelings, like what are they expressing more on social media? Maybe righteous anger. And like, how do you ask that without getting like too general or too specific? And of course, the gender, race options, trying to figure out what's the right set to use that doesn't like leave out people. So those are a lot of the stuff that we worked on. Yeah.
Amazing. Does anyone have any last minute comments they want to throw in about their experiences with the survey before I conclude with some thoughts connecting everything?
I have one question that I just want to throw out there. Yeah, it's MTalk. It's crazy. It's the first. I haven't been using it. I think SICSS-Howard Mathematica actually brought this to my understanding, and it's I enjoyed discussion with the group. But one thing I failed to ask in the group is the people that takes this talk as work to collect data. Do you think okay, how do I put the question? What about the kind of bias they might have, knowing that this is their job? They need to answer this question as work. Do you think it's the same? The answer you will get will be the same with someone that is natural, that doesn't take it as a job to just answer survey questions? Because in my mind, what I'm thinking is, well, I came from data science background, but what I'm thinking is, all these talkers answering the survey question, wouldn't they be just ticking and then just answer whatever and get your money, since this is a job? So how does it affect the data that we collect? Do we really think the data will be proper representation of what we're hoping to get?
That is a great question. Does anyone want to chime in with what they think might be different about MTurkers?
Can I say something on this? I'm sorry if it's like loud in the background, but so one of my advisors was telling me in political science, was telling me that he like met with one of the top journal reviewers at for coffee, and they were saying that one of the editors for one of the top journals in our discipline, and he was saying that he basically rejects every paper that just uses MTurk as for like their survey sample. And the primary reason was because there's maybe some systematic reason for us to believe that MTurk users specifically, just because of the quality of the sampling method, may not be as representative as we might think. So I think one of the maybe best practices that I've seen some of my advisors use is like using MTurk alongside some of these other more reliable like survey companies like Lucid or so yeah, that might be part of it. But I think the broader question about whether or not, for me, I study like low-income populations in cities, and this is a question that I come with my advisor all the time. It's like, even when we are pushing towards representativeness, are we really sure that this is going to systematically represent the people who are probably a little bit less likely to probably engage with like social media or so anyway, yeah, this is a really important question, so thanks for bringing it up.
So I wanted to just quickly add to that. So Kevin's point is 100%. And that was where my mind was. I also do a lot of data work too as an economist, and so I think that regardless of, I'm pretty sure MTurk probably has its own way of trying to like make it more representative. But I think the sample that you'll get in any of these online surveys are going to be biased, right? You'll have some level of sampling bias because you're not really doing a truly random sample, right? And so I think the way to kind of look at it, and the point about rejecting if your survey is just based on MTurk, makes to me a lot of sense as someone who also reviews articles. And so I think the way how to kind of combat that in your own work is just look to see, and I think even the instructions talk about this, is to look to see if the results that you're getting make sense, right? And so relative to like the overall US population, right? And so in our survey, we had questions about, like, for example, income levels, right? And so the overall income distribution of the US has relative, it's like a known fact what the median income distribution is in the US. So if we get like results that are like way off, right, that would tell us that we need to kind of reweight our sample towards more of what we know the true distribution should be. So I think stuff like that can kind of help, but yeah, when you're using these like online tools, I think it's almost impossible to overcome like the sampling bias.
So I just want to bring up an example from psychology. So a few years ago, there was like this scare about data quality coming from robots and so on MTurk. And so all of these like psychologists got together and put it like together all of this like work on trying to identify the bots from like real people putting data into MTurk. And then it turns out unsurprising to me that what they called bots were actually workers from non-US areas like India who were using like VPNs to get into MTurk to work. Obviously the pay is higher, right? And so there's this like racist way that I think we have this ideal idea of like who the ideal MTurk worker is, and if our data doesn't match it, then we consider it as like inhuman in some ways, but it actually ends up just being like another set of humans that we just haven't thought about being part of our workforce and part of our data structure.
Wow, this is amazing. This is a great conversation. I want to thank you all for bringing all of this up. I was unaware of some of the papers that you've sent. I didn't know that the bots were actually people and taking the surveys in different countries. Like, that's new information to me. So thank you so much for sharing this. Like, really sheds light on how we conduct research and surveys in the digital age. So thank you all. This was a great conversation. You all had really great ideas. I'm just looking at the chat now, and your contributions are amazing. So yes, I'm glad to hear all your amazing research ideas. You have data now, like, please analyze it, use that as pilot research, and continue on with the survey if you find it interesting. You'll have time next week to continue on with these projects or different projects, and hopefully this experience was useful to you and helped you learn something. So Nanette, I'll pass it back to you.
Please join me in thanking Grace. This is one of our heavier lift days, and she did this alongside teaching. How many like 10th through 12th graders are you teaching right now?
I'm only teaching 10. It's not too bad.
Multiply, each one of those is like 100 undergrads. Like, it's a different level of attention. So she paused in her stead and got someone to take over for her so she could be with us today. So please join me in thanking Grace. So I am going to tap dance for 9 minutes while we wait for our good friend Jesse to come back to deploy some surveys. I also have some logistics to share with you. Also want to mention Mango and Rebecca, please check your DMs. I wrote to you both directly. Please look and respond. Thank you so much. So I'd like to close our day by encouraging you to think about today as a metaphor for computational social science. So sometimes the rules and approach are clear, but often they change as you're going and you're building the bridge as you're walking across it. I prefer that to building the plane as you fly it, because that just sounds insanely scary. Because with a bridge, at least you can like balance it, but a plane while you're flying, that's crazy. Sometimes the rules and things aren't clear and you figure it out. You may head into things knowing everything. You may head in knowing nothing. Your partner in this work might know something, but in a different time zone or a different level academic training. Maybe you're trying to translate that between academics, spaces. Looking for experts in the field. You're all over the place on Google. This is the work. This is what we do. And you're now 4 days in during the week plus 2 days. So we're trying very hard to give you the chance to live in this world with other people who are interested in it, and to start building, helping us build. Our field is so new that you're part of the foundation of building computational social science. So we're so happy you're here. So a few logistical items, still tap dancing for 8 more minutes. Just a reminder, you can create Slack channels. So you could put up like, I don't know, anti-Black racism, Twitter, and see who decides to join, or go and post that in general and recruit some people. So there are like 1,000 people floating around in our Slack channel. So I encourage you, build relationships here. But I remember we ended up with a bunch of linguists a couple of years ago that ended up meeting each other's. So, and maybe there's other political scientists or other sociologists or other political scientists that want to be sociologists. I'm just saying, other people who are studying business, go exploring. Okay, go exploring in the larger group. We've had one person so far post in our general channel. But please get out there and meet other people from other sites. So all the sites run at different times, but all those people, some of them are done, some of them are just starting, but all those people are still floating around in the site. So think about spelunking around. You can go look around in other location sites too and see what they've done. You know, just saying, go have fun. Let's see, want to remind the folks that are going to be our question askers for the Federal Reserve Review Board of Governors. That is the Fed. I think there's too many words there. I don't know which one of my lovely staff forgot to remove something, but there's too many R's in that word there, in that title, but it's the Fed. We have a couple of folks coming from the Fed to join us. One of them is a graduate student, so you'll be able to learn about graduate student opportunities at the Fed. I should tell you that all of these organizations generally have opportunities for students and love to like work with people. And we've got funding, so you can like go do some work with them on your dissertation. So think about that. Start thinking about that. So we've got a few people who are asking questions tomorrow. That would be Brittany, Kevin S., Rebecca, and Ayana. So you're going to get to meet Erin, and she's bringing a graduate student with her. Graduate student was not part of the presentation, but she'll be part of the live Q&A and worked on the project that's going to be discussed. So, and I believe, I'm trying to remember if she's a student at Howard. She might be. So Brittany, Kevin S., Rebecca, and Ayana will be taking the lead on questions tomorrow. As you know, anybody else can watch the video. You can straight up show up and just come up with a question too. We love helping out our moderators with questions. So Nayanthara will be back tomorrow as our moderator. And then you'll see Ezene again next week. You remember Ezene from our first two panels, you'll see Ezene again. So we have a couple people who still need to sign up for guest speaker panel and lunchtime talks. So if you're confused, please reach out. That will be Mengo and Dereje. Please reach out if you're confused. We need to get that finalized. We usually have it finalized by this point. Please reach out if there's any confusion. And Arvin, can you go ahead and drop the link to the anonymous pulse survey into the chat box for me? Thank you, Arvin. That'll also be sent out on Slack tonight. We want to hear what you thought. Would be great to hear how things went. Anything we can do better. And then please join me in thanking our TAs. I know we're about to get one back. So just so you know, Jesse was only signed up to be here until before our session started, before you all started talking. So when he comes back, this is on his own time. So please make sure it's worth it for him. Have some fun. I'm going to call them and ask them to give him more money, of course. But he should be back in a few minutes. When we reopen the rooms, anyone who needs deploying help, go to the content room, the office hours content room, and meet with Jesse. Let's see what else is on my list. Oh, we're gonna go over the schedule, and then again we'll reopen the rooms. You're welcome, as long as we're here, you're welcome to be here in the rooms. So anybody needing to deploy, please go meet with Jesse when he gets back. Yes, I did say Slack. For the two people I said I need to talk to, Rebecca and Mango. And actually, I wrote it on Zoom. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, please check your DMs on Zoom. I wrote you both. So let's review the schedule really quickly. So Abril, can you please share our schedule? My team is so on point today. Undergrads and the undergrads and the one high school student are killing it today. Are anybody out there got scholarships at their university faculty? You know, you grad school or otherwise, you need to talk to these amazing young people. They are the future, to quote Whitney. Okay, so tomorrow, Friday, day 5, we're doing a mass collaboration and machine learning exercise with our instructor, Asha Yadev. She's a PhD candidate. She will be with us tomorrow. As always, your pre-arrival videos and corresponding takeaway, corresponding slides, and our takeaway sheet are there. As a reminder, the takeaway sheet, you can add comments if we have any mistakes. We try to make most things we do living documents so they can be updated. Participant Zoom link is there. And thanks to the leadership of someone who will remain anonymous, I just don't know who you are because it's anonymous. Our Zoom link is at the top for you for tomorrow, so you'll know exactly which one to click on. We have office hours, our final R, Stata, and Python office hours of the program. Final R, Stata, and Python office hours of the program. Those happen from 9 to 10 and 12 to 1 every day. During the second week, once I give you the email addresses of all of our TAs, if you decide your goal is again to work on Python and R, or Stata, you can arrange to meet with them to work on that, but we will no longer have office hours for Python, R, and Stata after tomorrow. So 9 to 10, the last morning session for that, 10 to 15, logistics with me, 10:15 to 10:30, introduction to the group exercise with our SICSS-HM Legacy TF instructor. You'll get a nice little break from 11:30 to 12 because I love you all and want you to be happy. Then 12 to 1, we'll have our last bite-sized lunchtime talk of the week. We'll have more next week with the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Yes, there's only supposed to be one R in there. Whoever, one of my students messed that up. Yeah, one R, one word. I think it said review and reserve. So we'll have Aaron and Zafsha with us tomorrow to talk about their work. Then you'll get another break from 1 to 1:15. Back with your group for exercises 1:15 to 3 o'clock. 3 to 3:15 break. We'll do our group exercise debrief and combine logistics debrief from 3:15 to 3:45. And then we'll have data assurance. So this has been mentioned to you. The data that we're sharing with you is sensitive. So we have to review and delete the data. So that's something you agree to when you sign up with Princeton, but we have a process to make sure we go through all of that. We have to provide that assurance back to Princeton in order to maintain the relationship with them. So from 3:45 to 5:30, we have a data assurance discussion about the ethics of data like this, about re-identification, de-identification that ties into our discussion with LaTanya Sweeney next week. So we have an extended period on Friday to go over that and also to delete the data. There are some things here that are required by Princeton to remain one of our sponsors. So we'll do that tomorrow. Okay, so we're going to reopen, not just yet, we're going to reopen the breakout rooms, and anybody who needs to deploy, go to content specific office hours content specific, and wait for Jesse. If Mengo and Rebecca could stick around with me for just a couple of minutes, that would be great. But before we do that, any questions? Drop screen share. Any questions at all? Anyone? Anyone? Yes, my jewelry is from South Africa. No one asked. But yes, that's where it's from. Thank you for asking. I also want to shout out Hoel, who was honorarily made a Mathematica TA today because I got confused. So we're like, you're a TA. Make your name a TA. Go to the TA room. And he was just like, okay. And that's tired. Okay. So, all right. Is Jesse back yet? Not yet, but probably soon. So we're going to reopen the breakout rooms. Have fun, folks. If you leave us, we will see you tomorrow bright and early.
Thank you all for watching. For more information on SICSS-Howard Mathematica, visit our website, follow us on social media, and join our email list.